There were two men who were walking along a trail. Suddenly, a large bear came crashing through the trees towards them. Instinctively, they began to run as fast as they could. As they continued to run, one looked back and noticed the bear was closing on them. He turned and said to his friend, "I don't think we're going to outrun this bear." His friend looked back and replied, "I don't have to outrun the bear, I only have to outrun you." Today's message is about inspiration. Now, as I pondered what I might say about inspiration, I came up with what I thought was several really good ideas. But as I considered how I might employ these ideas, I began to question whether or not they were actually good examples of inspiration. So I decided to go online and find the definition of inspiration. And I found various sites and various definitions. The first one being the quality or state of being inspired. That one was particularly helpful. But other definitions were the act of drawing air into the lungs, a divine influence or action on a person believed to qualify him or her to receive and communicate sacred revelation. The action or power of moving intellects or emotions. The act of influencing or suggesting opinions. A person, place, event, or object that motivates or drives a person to think, feel, or to do good or be creative. Something that motivates you towards your goal. And none of these gave me what I was looking for, so I thought, let me try one of the synonyms of inspiration, motivation. Psychology today seemed to provide the best description of motivation, which was literally the desire to do things. As you probably guessed, that wasn't really any more helpful than the definitions of inspiration. So I had to sit down and just kind of think more about this inspiration word. What I came up with was that inspiration is actually part of a process. I believe that an event happens that causes a reaction or a feeling that compels us to want to act. Now, for me to understand this process, I organized it as follows. Inspiration is the spark, while motivation is the flame, and out of the flame comes the heat of action. Now, if you're like me, there's lots of words, lots of actions that I see that do move me, but I don't always act on them. You know, in the parable of the talents, we can surmise that the first two servants were inspired to do their master's will, to prove that they were worthy of his trust. The goal that they aspired to may have been to accomplish the task they were given, or it may just have been to obtain their master's approval. Do you identify with these two servants? I do, on both of those points. The satisfaction of a job well done, and a pat on the back. They're both ideals that I've striven for in the past. Now, the third servant, he's a little more complicated. Is it really that he's lazy? I mean, we know he's afraid because he says, "Master, I knew you were a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, have what is yours." But as I read this, another idea occurred to me. Is it possible that the third servant was just unmotivated? The text tells us that the master gave to each according to his ability, and that the third servant was given only one talent. After seeing greater responsibility given to his fellow servants, is it possible that he said something to himself like, "If this is all you think of me, then that's what you're going to get"? Have you ever felt that way? Felt devalued? Perhaps that was how the third servant was feeling. It's funny, but for some reason, it's just easier to believe the bad stuff about ourselves than it is to believe the good stuff. others hurt us so easily? Do they really have that kind of power over us? Or do we give them that power and authority? Another thought occurred to me that the third servant could just be waiting to be inspired. Perhaps he saw his fellow servants get excited and respond with joy. And he just wondered why he didn't feel that way. Maybe this was the first time he ever experienced that lack of feeling or emotion. Or maybe this was just his life. When was the last time you felt that spark missing from your life? And what did you do to get it back? I believe this is why God calls us to be part of the body of Christ, the fellowship of believers. Isolated, we're vulnerable to the whisperings of the enemy and the burden of doubt. But together, it's easier to defend and encourage and lift each other up. We're called to live a life of grace as children of the living God. So how do we do that? Is being part of the fellowship of believers all we need to do? Last week, Pastor Justin spoke about Solomon's quest for wisdom. That fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Fear of God meaning respect. And that inspiration comes from respect. And that Solomon challenges us to seek God above all else. But the seeking of God takes effort on our part. I've heard it said many times that success is 10% inspiration and 90% desperation. That means active involvement on our part. We're still responsible to be preparing ourselves. So we need to be part of the fellowship and to seek God. But what else? In Matthew 28, Jesus sets forth what is called the Great Commission. To go and make disciples of all men. To reach out to others. In the movie Facing the Giants, it's a story of struggle and faith and overcoming. Basically, it's about inspiration. Being inspired and inspiring others. For those of you who've never seen the movie, it takes place at Shiloh Christian Academy, where Coach Taylor has been trying to turn their football program into a winning tradition. But the losing state of the football team and the risk of losing his job, among other personal issues, have weighed heavily upon Taylor. Now, as he despairs, he has a conversation with Mr. Bridges. Mr. Bridges is a member of the community who visits the church, visits the school once a year, and he prays over each locker and the student that locker represents. He tells the coach a story about a drought with two farmers. One farmer waits for the rain, while the other farmer continues to prepare his field to receive the rain. He concludes by telling the coach that he believes God has a plan for him, but he asks him, which farmer are you? So Coach Taylor then goes about preparing for whatever it is that God has for him. And by doing so, he prepares his field to receive the rain. He prepares his heart and his soul and his mind. And he finds the inspiration now to lead his team. His actions don't go unnoticed. His players take this inspiration to their classmates and out onto the field. For years, I attended church and hid anonymously in the ranks. I was part of the fellowship, if only passively. Then one day, Pastor Peter Bullock asked me to participate in the Christmas drama. I was as nervous as I could be. But his reassurance and confidence in me allowed me to take that step. In short, Peter inspired me, and I found that I was reaching out to others through this participation. The action created in me a desire, or rather inspired me to take further steps. I began listening to a variety of educational programs on Christian radio. I was seeking God. found the closer I became to God, the more inspired I was to take additional steps. Those steps led me to attend the Walk to Emmaus, then to become a certified lay speaker, which is why I'm in the pulpit today. And most recently, it's taken me to learn how to play guitar. And that's led me to multiple ministries, culminating in the beginning of a contemporary music ministry here, which has now evolved into our 9 a.m. worship service. But being inspired to take action, it's only part of the equation. By taking action and following your inspiration, you set a path and example for others to follow. In addition to Peter, there have been others who have inspired me by their actions to prepare my field to receive rain. Jesus calls us all to be disciples. And a disciple lives a life in grace by preparing himself through prayer and study and action. Now, prayer is one of those areas in my faith walk that's a real struggle for me. But my wife Linda is so diligent and devoted in her dedication to daily prayer that she inspires me to want to be better at it. Now, I'm making strides, but I still have a ways to go. Study is another area where I struggle. But my brother-in-law Gordon is up every day between 4 and 5 in the morning to spend time in the scriptures. I've taken the steps to load several books onto my Kindle, but opening them has not quite been as easy. Many of you knew my sister-in-law, Amy Hibbert. She was limited in things she could do because of various illnesses. But she was never too ill to respond to the needs of somebody else. I find there's times when it's easier to make an excuse than to make that extra effort to reach out to somebody. This is another area where I aspire to be better. These folks are just a few that have inspired me. Who do you draw your inspiration from? I don't know if it's possible to plan to be an influence on others, but I do believe that if you present yourself as an offering to God and work towards living a life in grace, you will bless others through that offering. As I said, these folks that I've mentioned are just a few that have influenced me. So in closing, I challenge you to take advantage of opportunities to prepare yourself to receive that inspiration. You can start by participating in the fellowship. Don't be afraid to take a chance to attend a class. There's lots of opportunities to help out at this facility or our new building up the street. You can pick up an instrument or serve in a mission activity. Work on speaking to God through prayer, studying His Word, and reaching out to others. We are called to live a life in grace, and that life begins with preparing our fields to receive the rain, to prepare ourselves to serve Him.